It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're live with Expresso as we head into the wild. This is such a highlight for me of every week, but we're getting very serious this morning. We are broaching poaching, a real crisis point at the moment, especially in when you put it in the context of our incredibly rich and diverse wildlife here in South Africa and Africa. And we've become a bit of a tipping point for the way the story is going to evolve. Animals are constantly targeted for personal gain, ignoring the real threats of extinction. And I think that's something that we are now broaching. Poachers who get caught seem to bounce back almost immediately. We haven't seen strict enough penalties, and animals are dying out faster than we can save them. In studio this morning, we welcome back Fiona Miles from Four Paws, who is going to give us a bit of context. And I know that you are doing a huge amount of work in this particular area, so you've got the facts down. I know where your heart is, undoubtedly, in this area. But let's get serious for a second here, because we know that these two do go hand in hand, hunting and poaching. And hunting maybe does have a role to play, or maybe it doesn't. I just don't know. I'm not educated enough. What is the difference between hunting and poaching from your perspective?
Well, hunting is a sort of a legal system. So there's permitting. It's legal. There's sort of standards and restrictions around it. Poaching, on the other hand, is criminal. It's theft and it's stealing from the natural resources. So it's organized crime, basically.
Yeah, and we've got to take on board that these natural resources they have a monetary value to us in terms of ecotourism, but they also have a far deeper relationship to South Africa, and we are reaching the point of extinction for many of these beautiful big species. And we're talking about lions and animals that I think we all took for granted would be here. Now, obviously, the big watershed species has to be rhinos, where rhino horn poaching has become one of the biggest. Elephants also probably included in that argument. Recently, we saw a big move forward in whatever direction, I don't know, of a legal rhino horn auction. Do you see this as a positive step? We know that maybe meeting the demand in the market for this could in some way squash that. We have a huge amount of rhino horn sitting in stockpiles rather than just burning it. What does your heart tell you, and what does your head tell you about this rhino horn auction?
I think, in my personal case, I think the heart and head are telling me the same thing, because there's a massive demand, and no matter how much we think we can produce, it's never going to be satisfied. It's never going to be enough. So it's not something that's really going to be sustainable in the long term. I think rhinos, for whatever reason, are being utilised. A big price is put on their head. We obviously more than 1,000 are being killed every single year, which is really, really frightening. And when is it going to let up? You know, when is it going to let up? And the demand is just too high. So putting their horns on auction, putting them through the process of being dehorned and harvested and everything else is not actually going to help in the long run, because we're just going to have to keep supplying more and more and more.
You ultimately are creating a market for it. By that same token, taking the argument a step further, we're going to get into what controlled hunting means, and we'll get that in our next segment. We'd love to hear from you guys. As always, 021 430 9881. That's 021 430 9881. Weigh in on the conversation. You can get controversial. Let it all out this morning. We want to hear from you. We're talking about poaching and hunting.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Kind of change the tone a little bit, because we are getting very serious this morning. We're talking about poaching, in particular, cause and effect. We know that controlled hunting is incredibly popular, incredibly, I think, monetary driven. When we talk about what you feel are those factors that are driving poaching in particular, not hunting, not that side of it, but is money the motivator? Are there other reasons why we see poaching to the degree that we see it?
I think money is the highest motivator. There are other poaching incidents, of course, which are maybe related to people wanting to survive.
Poverty-driven, yeah.
Poverty-driven and so on. But certainly poaching is largely driven, and to this extent, is largely driven by greed and money.
I think when you mentioned organised crime earlier, when you break down the costs of what it would take to get 2 helicopters, 2 teams of poachers, spotters, animal vets, unfortunately a lot of legal vets are being used in this and lured with that money. The costs involved of just getting one rhino horn almost seem to be more than you would be able to make from selling it. So it says to me that there is an underground, there is a culture being supported by that. Are we any closer to tapping into that dark underworld, do you think? Are we winning the war on poaching?
No, I don't think we're winning the war on poaching, because there isn't stringent enough legislation that really makes the consequence so high that puts anybody off. So obviously the benefit risk analysis is being done, and obviously it's still worthwhile to do. And that's what needs to happen, is we actually need to stop making this at all lucrative.
And I suppose, like most crime, the guys that are actually being caught are the lower level criminals, the guys who do stand a lot to lose, but then just get swallowed up into the system. So how do we approach this? Is it a case of signing a petition and going to government? Does it need a collective approach from organizations like Four Paws and those working in the conservation space? What is that? Is there a silver bullet, an answer to it all?
There's no one clear answer, but I think everybody can make a difference, and I think it does need a massive collective of insisting that this is our natural heritage, this is our wildlife, and it needs to be sustainable for the future. Captive breeding our wildlife in private hands is not protecting our wildlife for the future in its natural state, because of course it's going to have a very big impact on the biodiversity in the country and across Africa. So it needs a collective, absolute international demand to say this is not on, and it needs a very strong will by the government to say zero tolerance. There is just hands off our wildlife.
And every now and then we'll see one story that maybe grabs the headlines like that, but it seems like America has had a far worse response to one lion being shot than South Africa has to the hundreds that are being shot, and often in canned hunting scenarios like that. I have to really ask you now to look at it from the negative perspective, someone who is looking at it from, okay, well, we need money out of this, the wildlife needs to be a resource, we've got starving people. Is ecotourism enough to balance that out? Can we make the money, do you believe, through doing it the right way?
I really think so. I don't think we've tried hard enough yet, because there's been so much interest and, of course, a huge amount of investment into private ownership that everything's been privatized. All the animals now have this huge price on their head. They've been turned into commodities for private ownership. Have we really tried the massive ecotourism and tried to build the jobs around that, surrounding that? In private ownership, very few jobs and benefits are created, versus, I think, if there's really a huge will to create a massive ecotourism drive, there could be many more opportunities, because job opportunities will come from many more sources. From
that infrastructure. We already have it. Now let's take ownership of it. 021 430 9881. That's the number to dial. We'd love to hear from you. We'll get back into the wild in a sec.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. As we head back into the wild, we are talking to Director of Four Paws Animal Welfare Foundation, Fiona Miles, who it really is knowledgeable in so many areas relating to wildlife. But you really have educated me this morning when we're looking at this cause and effect of controlled hunting versus poaching and how the two feed off each other. And it's a very complex issue. There is no simple answer. We know that this is part of the problem, that it just keeps evolving. But the bottom line is that animals are being poached faster than we can reintroduce species or protect species in the wild, which means within a few years we are going to lose intrinsic species, certainly for South Africa, and we will never, ever get them back. How do we get this message across? What is the way that we start educating today's generation? I take it for granted that everyone's been to the wild, seen an elephant, seen a rhino, but there are hundreds of thousands of children in this country, which is unforgivable, who have never seen an animal in the wild.
I think that's exactly it. Our wildlife is not even accessible to our own population, so how to stand up for it? So I think really to be able to have opportunities and access to real wildlife areas. Of course, there's many, as you say, very good private nature reserves, but there are many areas that should be accessible, should be affordable and open to the public, so that they can actually experience the natural environment, learn about the animals, learn the very important role that they have to play for our future.
Within that system, and I think we forget that it's a system that is so finely balanced, and often, unfortunately, we are taking out apex predators, we are taking out key species within that system. I'm just looking at these beautiful elephants and how evolved they are in terms of their own emotional culture within a herd. But I've been lucky enough to be educated. What animals are the focal point? What are those that are closest to extinction and the real kind of danger areas for us?
The elephant, of course. The rate of poaching, the rate of slaughter at this point in time is completely unsustainable. We're going to lose elephant. Rhino, with more than 1,000 rhinos being poached every single year. the numbers are declining at a rapid rate. The fact that we have more lions in captivity now than we do in the wild is a very, very big indicator that we're going to lose them soon. No matter what people want to say, this constant captive breeding to try and save a species is also not sustainable, because it means that we have such a human control, and therefore
It's not the wild.
It's not the wild. So we're losing our wild at a rapid rate, and we're just not seeing it.
Oh, thank you so much, Fiona. I know this is always a difficult subject to broach, but you're out there working in the front line, so we really appreciate everything that you do. And thank you for kind of taking a bit of emotion out of this and being very fact-based this morning. Bottom line is we are losing these species, and we will never, ever get them back. Thank you so much for tuning in for that.